Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it's a pleasure to join you today to discuss the potential for the emerging greenhouse gas markets to play a role in addressing the problem of deforestation. I'm speaking to you today from a long history of involvement in the climate change policy debate. Earlier in my career, I served as counsel over on the House side to Congressman Jim Cooper of Tennessee, who became interested in carbon trading policies in the late 1980s. He believed that a market-based approach to climate mitigation could attract bipartisan support in favor of legislation. Unfortunately, it's taken a little longer than we envisioned at that time. Back in the early 1990s, the primary examples of carbon offset activity were forest offset projects in the international arena that were sponsored by companies like AES, New England Electric, and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. It's interesting to me that these pioneering efforts have since been overtaken by a much larger global industry that is focused much more on other forms of carbon abatement than forestry. I recently returned to the U.S. after spending 5 years in my company's London office, where I watched firsthand as the global carbon market took off and participated in the development of that market. So today, I'm appearing before you as a businessman on behalf of 179 members of the International Emissions Trading Association. These companies are all active in the international carbon market. The association includes industry and industrial giants like AEP, Duke, PG&E, AES, Shell, Chevron, DuPont, and Dow. It also includes many of the world's leading financial institutions like Merrill Lynch, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Morgan Stanley. There are also a few of the smaller firms like the Chicago Climate Exchange and NatSource, my company, who participate as a part of this membership. And I do think the AIDA membership is the backbone of today's carbon market. My company, NatSource, is active in this market as a fund manager. We're relatively small. We manage approximately $1.2 billion in assets. These assets are entrusted to us on behalf of companies that are seeking compliance with laws, for whom we build portfolios of credits from the Clean Development Mechanism and the Joint Implementation Mechanism of the Kyoto Protocol. And we also work on behalf of investors who seek financial returns from these markets. My company has invested in both U.S. and international forestry projects, but these investments are quite small. They represent less than 1% of the purchases we've made. I've described these projects in my written testimony. One of them is an afforestation project in Chile, and the other is an avoided deforestation project in California that we are investing in, believing that it may comply with the California emissions trading law. So this is what I'm here to discuss today, is how we could tilt our investment so that we could potentially invest even more in carbon sequestration. We and other members of AIDA believe that the market should be able to invest in a much larger degree in this sector, but the reasons we don't are quite sensible. It's because the policy environment isn't favorable enough to encourage us to go into into forestry investments. And I'll describe precisely why that is. Maybe I'll start with a grounding of the type of policy that AIDA supports in the emissions trading arena. First of all, the membership is united in our belief that markets are the most efficient way to address climate change, and that free markets will ensure that scarce resources are deployed in a way that achieves the maximum amount of emission reductions at the lowest possible cost. We support policies that use allowance trading for covered sources, but also allow the import of project-based offsets from facilities outside the capped entities. And we believe that the use of these offsets should be free and unlimited, and that this could deliver significant cost savings to the U.S. economy in particular. We're already watching as in the international arena, it is reducing compliance costs. The most recent numbers I could get my hands on were from 2006. We should have full 2007 data soon, but in 2006, European allowance prices averaged right around $22 a ton. And during that same period, you could buy international offsets for less than $11 a ton. So it does demonstrate a pretty dramatic cost savings that's evident from use of offsets. I think EPA's recent analysis of the Lieberman-Warner legislation also bears this out, and they have estimated that unlimited use of international and domestic offsets could reduce allowance prices by over 70% below the prices in the current bill. And our industry thinks those kind of savings are worth fighting for. We also believe that given the magnitude of the challenge posed by climate change, that a full range of policy tools should be used, and that greenhouse gas markets are just one tool among many that could be valuable in this fight. That said, it's the most successful tool used on the globe to date for mobilizing capital into climate protection. We do believe that environmental integrity matters on offset projects, but that there are rules that can be utilized to ensure environmental integrity in offsets, particularly in the area of sequestration. The way this market has developed, I think you all know that it's been largely driven by the Kyoto Protocol and the European emissions trading system. That scheme allows limited use of offsets, but it has a restriction on the use of forestry-related offsets. Avoided deforestation, as Ambassador Eisenstadt noted, is not a project category allowed under the Kyoto Protocol at all, but there are two small slivers of forest protection that are allowed. One is afforestation and the other is reforestation. Unfortunately, those types of projects are not allowed in the European emissions trading system. National governments from Europe can purchase those kind of reductions, but they've not done so in a very large way. So as a result, if you look at the databases of available credit supplies from various types of abatement strategies, forestry-related projects represent less than 1% of it, and could do a whole lot more if they were permitted to be used more fungibly with other types of commodities. Just to give you a sense of the size, NatSource's Advisory Research Unit took a look at it, and in looking at the literature available on this, it looks like somewhere between 15 and 75 gigatons of additional supply could be brought to the market from avoided deforestation if those units were allowed to be fungible in the international market. Those could reduce the overall compliance costs by 40%. Just to give you some flavor of the international carbon market, it has been growing rapidly in the last few years. In my written testimony, you'll find 3 charts that sort of sum it up. Last year, that market globally was worth just under $60 billion. I think our estimate is $59 billion in total. U.S. companies, I should say, are active in this market, as a number of U.S. companies have assets in Europe where they're forced to comply with the European law. There are also numerous U.S. financial, legal, and service firms active in this market. It trades mostly in European allowances. They're the primary instrument traded, and of the $59 billion that I mentioned, roughly $41 billion of that represented EU allowance trades. The balance of the investment mobilized by that market was in clean development mechanism projects, worth over $17 billion last year. There was a little bit of investment also in a type of credit that can be created in the countries of the former Soviet Union, but they were less than $1 billion in investment last year. I expect that segment will grow. In terms of policy recommendations going forward, I've already described that the limitations on use of forestry-related offsets in Europe has really caused a chilling effect on this particular market segment, and the shortcomings of the Kyoto Protocol in the area of avoided deforestation has also chilled investment in those types of assets. So looking at that policy framework, we would have 3 recommendations for your consideration in the policy arena. First of all, a major goal of the design of the post-2012 project-based mechanisms internationally should be to significantly increase investment in forestry-related activities and deforestation in particular. In addition to its environmental importance, forest sequestration could be a particularly important category for countries and regions of the world that are currently not attracting very much investment from the CDM, such as sub-Saharan Africa. U.S. federal policy should authorize the use of international carbon offsets and forestry-related offsets in particular as a key tool to control costs of complying with emission targets here. Proposals that include quantitative limits or restrictions on use of forestry-related credits for compliance would only increase the cost of the program and create market distortions. Thirdly, U.S. policy should also support reforms in the project-based mechanisms so that they work better. It's not easy to get projects approved through the clean development mechanism. It's quite a rigorous regime. It's a confusing regime, and it could be improved so that it worked swiftly and efficiently and reliably in producing these assets. In the future, we hope that these markets continue to grow, and we in the international emissions trading community stand ready to assist you as you consider policy alternatives for involving our sector in the global fight against deforestation and climate change. Thank you very much.